So here we all are to study this second module of this series, this course, basically. It's this course. It's been around for quite a few years. And it's, yeah. So we're going to look into, first of all, you've got some course notes there. Tell me, Venerable Dundrum, how people get their course notes.
So on the event page, there are two links. There's a link called Course Materials and then another link called Course Notes. You click on either of those. The Course Materials will take you to some of the FPMT meditations, and then the Course Notes is Venerable Robina's packaging.
What do you mean by the first one?
So the sort of the traditional FPMT, if you wanted to give
this is the same material all put together in one document.
Okay.
That's the point. The others are just confusing because they're all bits and pieces of paper, but this is reformatted as A5 or phone version, and everything that is in the FPMT is all here together, the actual transcript of the teachings. And then there's a second booklet that'll come, which is for your practice day, which is a practice manual explaining the meditations. So, and all the meditations are in this one, though. This is the point. The meditations are in this booklet, the teachings, the transcript of the teachings are in this booklet. So I really highly recommend that to supplement the words you're going to hear from me, because I talk in a different way, but this particular teaching, I really encourage you to get it. I wish the other one, can you please delete the other one? It's just complicated.
Yep. Sure. Yep.
So then it'll be the course notes, right?
Yep. And
that's it's either for A5 or phone. There's two versions there, yeah?
Okay. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Everything's in it, including the meditations and also, so it's the course notes from, in this case, this module was taught initially by Sangha Kadro. Some of you know Venerable Sangha Kadro. This is taught a while ago, so that all her course notes, and she's got much more detail than I'll be giving you. So you absolutely need to read the course notes to supplement what I'm telling you. The second one is there are all the meditations that she's done, like the session 1, then meditation, session 2, meditation, all the different meditations are in there. And then the part 2 is the supplementary teachings from Lama Zopa, Lama Yeshe, and Geshe Jumpa Tekchok. So it's all together in one place. You don't need the other notes at all, Dundrup. Okay, thank you. But I highly recommend you read this to supplement. Otherwise, you're not going to get enough information from me, I promise you. I rave on, but she's much more detailed and giving you all the different techniques, explaining step by step. So I'd really ask you, for this 5 weeks we're together, I ask that you do that in between each session. That would be really excellent together. And you try to even if you read the meditations, that would be very good experience, So let's just think we're going to do this little module together, listening to these teachings, thinking about the meaning, really trying to get a deeper understanding of this word meditation, because, it's many variations of it. There are many definitions, and that's perfectly fine. But here, very specifically, the Buddhist techniques and what it is and why we do it. This is the point, We're going to listen to this and for the next 5 weeks, so we can have this deeper understanding, so we can use these tools to help us unpack our minds, understand our minds more and more clearly, so we can do this job gradually, that Buddha says we're all capable of transforming our minds completely from neurotic, depressed, miserable to happy, clear, and wise. I mean, who doesn't want that, This is the purpose of our being together, so that we can then help others do the same thing. So let's, I'll just sing the prayer, but who's the host? Mary or Lou?
Lou's going to screen share the prayers.
Okay, we'll just do it. That's great. We'll just do our refuge prayer as usual. A little prayer here. I'll say it one time in English. And so this is just stating these words, The first 2 lines are expressing our reliance on the Buddha. And the second 2 lines are stating this motivation that I sort of already said first. We'll say it first time in English. I'll say a few extra words just to get the meaning really clear for us. So we are thinking, until we are enlightened, we are going to rely upon the Buddha, his teachings, and then the community of practitioners. So by the virtuous karmic seeds that we plant in our mind from listening to these teachings, may we become eventually long-term, may we fully develop ourselves so that we can be of benefit to all sentient beings. Sangye charang soke chognam la jancho baru dagni kyabsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drobha shog Sange Charang Soke Chognam La Janchub Baru Dagni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gipes Sonam Ki Drola Penjir Sange Dropa Shog. Okay, everybody, that's it. Thank you.
May we offer a mandala?
I think it's auspicious to do that. Yes, for the beginning of the module. Why not? It's a good idea. Well done. Yes. You want to chant it? No, I'll sing it. Shall I? And you offer. Yeah. Okay. So what Dundrup's got holding there is actually a representation of the whole universe. So this is prayer as we're offering all the contents of the universe to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, and the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam, that'll be enough. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. Very nice. Thank you, Dundrup. So what I want to really just do is just try and talk in a very down-to-earth, ordinary way about this word meditate, and try and dismiss from your mind any concepts you've had already out there. Okay. So now the word meditate. So before we even say that, let's look at the job of being a Buddhist. I mean, I say this quite a lot. I quote this a lot, because the etymology of this word Buddha, it really tells us everything. When we get the meaning of this word, it tells us, it implies the methodology of being a Buddhist. It's almost so simple, it seems too simple, But this word Buddha implies, the first syllable implies the eradication from our mind of all neuroses, fears, depression, anxiety, jealousy. I mean, this is a really simple point, and this is already shocking for us because this is not the way we think in the world, isn't it? So this is what we've got to hear. This is what Buddha has found. This is the unique finding of the Buddha from his own direct experience, that all the unhappy states of mind, all the miserable and paranoid and depressed and jealous and rage, the whole spectrum from the most mild to the most intense, which, as we can see, is the suffering of beings, Buddha has found that these states of mind are not at the core of our being. The second syllable implies the development, literally to perfection, if you like, of everything else in your mind. Love, compassion, wisdom, intelligence, happiness, blah, blah. And this is really literally, speaking simply, what the mind of a Buddha would be. Okay, to hear the qualities of that person sounds a bit like science fiction. So what this tells us immediately, the job to be done as a Buddhist, because if it's possible to rid the mind of all the rubbish and the pain and the suffering and to develop all the marvelous stuff, speaking really ordinary language, then it clearly, obviously tells us the method. The key, and this is really the point, the key job of being a Buddhist, and it's almost surprising, it almost seems too simple. The key job of being a Buddhist is to lessen in the mind your delusions and grow the goodness, which is ending up being Buddha. So that means we have to learn to distinguish between the neuroses and the virtues, the rubbish, the pain, the hurt, and the positive qualities. But this is not how we talk in modern psychology. But it's a very specific technique. And it's really a very difficult technique, because for us, as far as we're concerned, our mind is just this big soup of emotion, isn't it? It's not as if, it's like your garden is full of weeds and flowers. The weeds don't politely grow down one end of your garden and the flowers down the other end, in which case it will be easy to do your gardening. If our only had negative states of mind 1 minute and then positive the next, we would know the difference. But they all come like in a big soup, and we just can't distinguish. It's virtually impossible unless we have a skill that's called concentration meditation. So this is the purpose of there's 2 modes of meditation in Buddhism, 2 modes, millions of techniques, but you can divide them all into 2 categories. The first one, and this is known, these are the classic terms they use in Buddhist psychology. The name given to the first one is the name of the end result, and it's called literally calm abiding. Sounds a bit abstract. Samatha in Sanskrit, shine in Tibetan. And what it's referring to is a super subtle, super laser-like level of focus. The degree to which is impossible to comprehend because it does not exist in modern psychology. So if the job is to learn first, if the job is to at least lessen, forget about get rid of, because that's eventually it'll happen, but to at least lessen the neurotic states of mind and to grow the positive states of mind. And this sounds a curious idea to us because this is not how we talk in modern psychology. We don't talk like this. If that is the job, then we clearly know we need to know how to distinguish one thought from another. But the trouble is we have 1,000 thoughts a second. They come like in a big soup. We have waves of feelings. We're not nearly precise enough to identify the thoughts that inform our feelings. So we absolutely have to have, to some degree, this technique that's called single-pointed concentration. That's a general term for it, you know. It's a type of concentration. Shamatha is a certain level of it. I mean, I think the single point of concentration is referred, or concentration is in Sanskrit, it's the word samadhi. But it's referring to, like I said before, a state so subtle that is completely beyond the conceptual, completely beyond the brain, completely beyond the senses. In other words, something we don't even posit as existing. So most of us in this room today, unless we give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll and go off to the mountains for several years, we will not accomplish this single point of concentration, which doesn't mean we can't try. Doesn't mean we can't use it every day in our lives. You know, this is the point. So because of the Buddhist analysis, the Buddhist description, this categorizing of the contents of our mind is into negative and positive states. The third category, I like to call them the mechanics of our mind. And we're going to discuss this when we get into the techniques, but this would have been discussed in your first module with Justin, I think, the way the mind works. You know, you study the way the mind works. So here we are in this psychological model of the mind, which you would have thought about, you would have learned about in module 1 with Justin, divides all, and you've heard this enough from me time and time again. We divide all the contents of this chaos, this seeming chaos, which we call emotions, into 3 categories. There are those that are neurotic, deluded, ridiculous, the source of our pain, which are not at the core of our being, which can be removed. The second lot are the valid, appropriate, reasonable, virtuous, good ones that are the source of our happiness and our ability to help others. And the third lot, I call them the mechanics of our mind, because they're neither virtuous and non-virtuous in this very specific way that Buddhist psychology talks, but they're utterly necessary. You're a murderer or a meditator, you need good concentration. So concentration in its nature is neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. And the trouble with these 2 terms is we don't use that terminology in modern psychology. It sounds like judgment. We don't talk like that. But it's a fundamentally necessary one to comprehend in Buddhist psychology. Therefore, to understand why you want to meditate, So what's fascinating? So the second mode of meditation is generally, again, it's known in terms of the end result, and it's known in Sanskrit as Vipassana. Now it gets confusing because there are many techniques that Buddha taught. Vipassana, it means insight, and it's a particular technique, and that's not the one we're discussing here. The type of insight we're discussing here is insight into the way this seeming chaos works, in order to use our concentrated mind, in order to unpack and unravel with intelligence and identify in a coherent way what is in our mind. That's really the broad function of the second mode of meditation. We need to get in, and the word in English is very good. In some languages, it's a very weird word, so it sounds all kind of religious and strange, but it's a really excellent word. You think about that word, insight. We use it in everyday language. You're thinking of some problem and you go, I got a bit of an insight into that problem today. So what happened? What did you do? You thought through something, didn't you? You used your noggin and thought through the problem and got a bit of insight. So that's exactly the meaning here. So the broader point here, therefore, we're thinking, what are we going to try to get insight into? It sounds kind of curious, That the other point here that's implied, and it's not discussed overtly in this module, it's a little bit even in the first module, but not too much. We learn this particularly as we get into the more advanced levels of our practice, especially when we get to realize emptiness. That the key point that Buddha is making is, first of all, that what goes on in our mind is the main source of our happiness and suffering. Again, shockingly to us, the world, we think completely the opposite, you know. But as far as the Buddha is concerned, from his own analysis, from his own experience, he has found that the main source of our happiness and suffering, and this is referring to every living being, is in the mind. So all the more reason we need to become familiar with what's going on there so we can unpack and unravel it. So therefore, so then we look at the word in Tibetan. It's very fascinating, this word to meditate, this verb. It's so surprising to us because we've all got this very deep kind of assumption that somehow meditation is vaguely the first mode, which is concentration, and vaguely called mindfulness. So we kind of think, we all think of it as some kind of technique that the thoughts go away. We think it's a method of relaxing, you know, and we've got these very vague notions about it, which are not correct. But it's surprising now to hear the Tibetan word for the verb in English, to meditate. The Tibetan is the word gom, and it literally translates as to familiarize, to become familiar with. That's a real surprise to us. It's quite shocking to hear that. So what is Buddha talking? So this is the point. This word actually is referring to the second mode of meditation. That's the real meaning of meditation. The first one is just preparing your mind to get concentration, this laser-like focus that is in its nature eventually non-conceptual. I mean, like a laser-like level of focus that you can then use in a very sophisticated, brilliant way in the second mode of meditation to get insight into this chaos, to unpack and unravel and get insight. So the insight point, so to familiarize, so familiarizing your mind, one way of talking about the word familiarize, you know, you ask, well, familiarize what with what? Well, it's your mind. You're trying to familiarize your mind with what? And this comes as a surprise to us as well. There's two things we're trying to do in being a Buddhist. And this is indicated by that lovely analogy I endlessly use, that a bird needs two wings. We are trying to familiarize ourselves precisely with two things. One, with how things exist, with so-called reality. And two, we're trying to familiarize our minds with virtue, with goodness. So the implication here is this: the first, the implication of this term Buddha, the eradication of all the delusions. This is telling us what reality is. So Buddha's key point across the board is that we all suffer, the universe, all beings in the universe, all sentient beings, all mind possessors, all semchens, mind possessors in the universe, suffer and therefore harm others because we are caught up in these ridiculous, negative, neurotic, delusional states of mind. They have a key function of causing us to not be in sync with reality at all levels. Reality in Buddhism is just referring to ultimate reality. Buddha's telling us, for example, Buddha's view is, you know, that everything is impermanent. Now, he didn't make this up. He's not a creator. I mean, it's anything, and it's one thing, for example, there are extensive teachings in Buddhism about impermanence. They talk about gross impermanence. They talk about subtle impermanence. It's really quite sophisticated. So it's the Buddhist observation of how things exist at a particular level. So just, you know, reality isn't one-dimensional. There's ways that things exist. This is Buddha's key thing. So one way in which we are not in touch with reality, which is a very gross level, is that we cling mightily to everything as being unchanging. We don't like change, you know? So we grasp at things. So a relationship, finally we'll be, you know, we will be, I've found happiness, we'll say. We will be together until we're 80, we say. So, you know, because we are so desperately attached, and there's another misconception, we cling to things as having a permanent nature. So of course, because they don't in reality have a permanent nature, and this is extensively in the Buddhist literature, it's something that anybody with half a brain can prove immediately. But Buddha's telling us we might know it intellectually, but experientially, we're clinging to the exact opposite. This is exactly why we suffer. In reality, things are impermanent, but we think they're not. So there's this terrible disconnect between the way we see things and how things exist. This is across the board the way Buddha talks. So we need to familiarize our mind, one way of saying it, program our minds with, learn and think about and study and become familiar with how things do exist. Part of that process is removing from the mind the misconceptions that cause us to live in la la land. This is the thing that pervades the whole Buddhist approach, So we need to get insight into how things exist. We need to stop believing in the false ways we think exist in order to get insight in how they actually exist. This is what Buddha means by liberation. This is how he talks. I mean, we don't hear it like this. It's not spoken like this, but this is the point. So to do this work of unpacking and unraveling this mind and beginning to identify the nonsense misconceptions, the emotional afflictions, these misconceptions deep in the bones of our beings, that one, that I'm permanent, that two, the relationship, I'll last forever, that three, for example, all the delusions, attachment, for example, that believes the cake will make me happy, all these layers and layers and layers of different conceptual states of mind that the Buddha say we're totally programmed with from countless lifetimes. Our job is to deconstruct these, to argue with them, and to get insight into how they are misconceptions in order to get insight into how things exist. This is the essence of the job of being a Buddhist, So these formal meditation techniques are the techniques that enable us, that facilitate this process. The first one is vital because the Buddha, if we can take as our view, Buddha's view that the mind goes back and back and back, we've had countless lifetimes. We don't come fresh into this lifetime and then learn freshly from mummy and daddy. That's just not feasible for the Buddha. We come into this life totally, completely programmed from this first second of conception, from our own past programming. So to deprogram the mind and to reprogram it, this is, again, another way of saying what the job is. And the depth of these delusions for the Buddha, we should be quite humble with ourselves. We're so totally addicted to these misconceptions, they so totally pervade our minds that we don't even see that the way things exist is not the way they exist. The way we see them is not the way they exist. So it's really quite a subtle job, and it's a long-term job, So the two modes of meditation, concentration and insight, and we'll discuss the method even you use in the second mode of meditation to get that insight. These are the techniques. This is a technology. I mean, so and we need to learn these. So it's concentration meditation, the first one, is the one that vaguely what people mostly think about meditation as, where you learn to not be discursive, you learn to not buy into the thoughts, you learn to focus the mind and not follow every chatting thought that arises. And of course, it's tremendously difficult because, we're totally addicted to this. I always quote our friend Venerable Rene, whom some of you might know, whose teachings you might have gone to. He's a serious meditator the last 40 plus years, 45. I interviewed him in the 90s in Mandalay in 1995 about one of his first retreats. It was a single-pointed concentration retreat. So he was there for like 2.5 years at our center in Spain, in the Sierra Nevada, near Granada. Beautiful place, up in the mountains. His Holiness the Dalai Lama blessed it. He said it reminded him of Tibet, this ancient little place with little stone caves, little houses. People do retreat there all the time. And he was there for 2.5 years. So, as we might know from the text, and we'll go through this briefly in this course, the culmination of this technique, this first mode of meditation, as I said, is known as calm abiding, or shine in Tibetan, shamatha in Sanskrit. He was doing this retreat. And in the text, we'll go through this at some point. I don't know if this is mentioned in the teachings here, but we'll go through it. This technique is described in terms of 9 stages of cultivating concentration. So he said he maybe touched upon the 5th of the 9 stages in that period, So this is talking, and this shows how long it takes, 2.5 years, right? He said he maybe got to the 5th quite soon, not even maybe in the first year, but he seemed to and this is another discussion as well. He said he felt in that particular condition he couldn't get further. And this is an added interesting point, by the way. I interviewed him about that retreat in the 90s. It was before that. I interviewed him at Courtin Monastery in Kathmandu. Lama Zopa's monastery, Lama Yeshe's monastery, which is, people have been there. It's up in the hills. It's beautiful. It's in the mountains, sort of the mountains, in the well, a little mountain top in the valley of Kathmandu. But it's it's very busy these days. It used to be very quiet, but now it's like suburbs down there. And there's 4 o'clock in the morning, all the Hindu prayers and the dogs barking. It's hardly quiet. But he said, and this is what's fascinating. He said, my mind got more subtle more easily at Courtin. So this is one of the things we'll go into as well, the prerequisites for a proper place to meditate. If you're trying to go off into a meditation retreat, there are various prerequisites. And one, they all talk about, this is an ideal to go into a retreat, right? Is a place that's been blessed by the presence of previous meditators, and that's really is an interesting point. His mind got more subtle, more easily in a much busier place. But all the Tibetans will tell you they loved Kathmandu as very blessed, very special, very holy, So that's an interesting extra point. We'll go into this. So 2.5 years he was there, 2.5 years, just to get single point of concentration. He got the 5th of the 9 stages. So we're talking something to do the long term. We're talking something quite serious. To get concentration to fully develop this 9 stages of concentration, it's, unless you're like born with qualities from a past life, it's literally impossible to do it in an ordinary situation. You have to absolutely give up. This is a classical one, a serious commitment to get this technique, right? Which doesn't mean we can't use it every day. We're going to be talking about it as an ordinary thing we do every day, right? But I'm talking for the serious meditators. The only way to accomplish it is to have to give away. It's sort of like the only way to become like Roger Federer in tennis. You know perfectly well you can't have an ordinary day job and then play a bit of tennis at night and maybe have occasional weekends. You will not get there, quite literally. You've got to sacrifice every other activity and commit yourself 8 hours a day for 20 years. We understand that very easily in our culture. Well, that's the same here. And literally it would be impossible to accomplish this single point of concentration in an ordinary life with families and beloveds and children and dogs and mortgages and jobs. It would be literally just technically impossible, because the conditions that are necessary to really go beyond all the crazy thoughts, to go beyond attachment and nonsense, are quite sophisticated, So this is the classical full technique. So the concentration meditation, though, we can all try it. We can all do it every day. There's no question about that. Of course we can. We get some benefits, So in a sense, what I'm saying here is the real meaning of the word to meditate actually refers to the second one, insight. The first one is like preparing your mind to get it to be focused. So you can use that laser-like focus to do whatever you like in the second mode of meditation, where you then get insight into impermanence, into karma, into all the teachings of the Buddha, which is what he is saying are the way reflections of what reality is. So there are lots of techniques that help us. I mean, some of the techniques in here, for example, the very first one, you look in your course notes. If you've got your course notes already, maybe you haven't got them yet. Have you gone and got your course notes? The phone, let's look into the contents and I'll go through the contents with you. Don't go to the other one, course something. You've deleted it, Dundra? Okay, good. Get the phone version or the tablet version. They're formatted appropriately. So part 1 is the teachings and meditations by Venerable Sangye Kadru. So each session we'll try one or maybe of these techniques. We'll do one of these today. So if you've got your course notes open, you'll see in the contents on page 4. The session 1 is a teaching, and then the first meditation on awareness of the breath. That's a typical example of concentration. The next one's the 9-round breathing, clarity of mind meditation. Then another one, meditation on appreciating our human life. Another one, purification. Another one, meditation on impermanence. Another one, meditation on the Buddha. Now, of all of those, meditation on awareness of the breath, that's an example of the first mode. All the others are the second mode. There are different kinds of meditations where you visualize certain things, you use conceptuality. So in other words, you're broadly, in these broad techniques, you're familiarizing your mind with certain concepts. I mean, we all know this from the meditations we do every morning and the evening here at the center. The evening one, for example, we do the meditation on purification. That's chapter 8. So that's you're basically using your thoughts, imagining something, imagining doing the negativity, imagining regretting it, imagining having compassion, imagining the nectar coming. It's using your intelligence, it's using your thoughts. So meditation, one of the commonest misconceptions is that somehow meditation is opposite to thinking. This is beyond naive. Concentration meditation, yes, the goal is not to engage in the thoughts. That doesn't mean you're not going to have the thoughts. We all go crazy with our thoughts. We can't stop them initially, but it's to not engage in your thoughts. That's the technique in concentration meditation. And we'll do a bit this evening, right? So the goal in concentration meditation, the goal isn't to make the thoughts go away. The goal isn't to relax. This is not a relaxation technique. There are lots of relaxation techniques. Yoga teaches many of them, and we need relaxation. This is absolutely not a relaxation technique. That's one of the biggest misconceptions, you know. It is not to force the thoughts to go away. It is not to have some kind of vision or blissful feeling or unusual something or other. There are so many weird ideas around. Concentration technique is actually really boring. It's really simple but boring, you know. It's very precise. So let's just talk about that here. The two they talk about in the traditional teachings on single-pointed concentration, there are two main obstacles, two things that prevent us from having the mind to stay focused. One is the tendency of the mind to, they simply say it this way, is to be overexcited. So that's attachment energy. One of the functions of attachment is to all the time think about things, endlessly thinking. You're all excited. You're looking forward to the meal, the thing you're going to do, this and that, he this, she that, anticipating things, chat, never stop. And we grasp at those thoughts. That's the excitement energy. It's never stopping. Everybody's like that. So that's the one obstacle. Clearly, if you're trying to focus your mind, but you can't stop chatting away, clearly you'll never focus your mind. It's very obvious, isn't it? So that's one obstacle that you're training yourself to not buy, to go against, to train your mind to not buy into the thoughts. You've got to catch yourself. But the other tendency, and this can be a very tricky one because it can feel nice, and that's the extreme other tendency of the mind to space out. So it's nice to space out. It's nice to relax. It's nice to sort of just, you know, flop. but that's the exact opposite of what we're trying to do here. So even if, this is my way, this is another thing I'm going to say here, which is what I say, and we might read this in the text, but if you even look at our lives emotionally, we're either kind of sink into misery and depression and hopelessness, or we have all the busy, perky, excited, wonderful, planning this and doing that and doing this and planning this. The mind's super excited and super focused, you know, super chatty. We've got to go beyond both of those extreme tendencies. And the whole of the 9 stages is described in terms of training the mind to not get involved in the excitement and to not get the mind involved into the sinking, or they call it the sinking, or the kind of like dull or sinking mind. And part of the problem with this one is that many people sit very comfortably, like sitting cross-legged, and they can sit very comfortably, and then you think you're having a nice meditation, but basically you're sinking, you're becoming dull, and it's not meditation. Especially the more advanced stages, they say, you can really mistake, you can really confuse concentration, thinking, there's this dull mind, very sinking and kind of dull, but very comfortable with concentration. So it's really, you really need to know what you're going on, which is why there are hundreds of books published, hundreds, if not thousands. We really got to know the ones that are accurate, you know, that are the precise presentations. I mean, Venerable Gentleman and I were talking about this today. He's going to try and develop it more and more and have really classic concentration technique sessions, so we can really learn precisely how to concentrate properly, you know, as well as how to use that in another session where you do your insight, you know, to put these two together. It's really important people learn because there's so much rubbish out there. So concentration, I mean, you know, is the technique is simply deciding, and it's good to start with 5 minutes, I promise you. We did an entire retreat with Lama Yeshe one time. It was he got us to do Mahamudra meditation. And we're going to do that, I think, this weekend, isn't it? Isn't it? We're doing Mahamudra this weekend? Okay. And that's a concentration technique, but it's a very specific type, you know. But he got us to do 5-minute sessions because many people, you can sit for 20 minutes, 90% of your time is wasted. because you're not properly doing what's supposed to be done, because we don't know what it precisely means, you know. So this concentration meditation, technically what you're doing is this. One, you decide on something to focus on. So clearly, so you can even focus on something on the outside. There's no contradiction. You could decide to look at that pillar, you know, to look at a rose, to look at something physically. You could do that. There's nothing wrong with that. You can start with that. But the obvious one, and the one that's still fairly gross as an object that Lord Buddha teaches, is to use the breath. So the breath can get quite subtle, but finally, certainly from this tradition that we're discussing here, finally, to get the mind to the subtlest level, the breath is too gross. It's still physical. You need to go beyond the breath. You have something more subtle to focus on, you know. So what you're doing in the concentration meditation, we'll do it in a minute. I'll tell you how to sit and everything. How are we going for time? 7. Okay. You're deciding to focus. We're going to use the breath. We'll just use the thing we'll learn to focus on. And listen to this as if you haven't heard it before, okay? Think of it freshly. We're going to choose the sensation at our nostrils, okay? So when you breathe in and out, you can see it's a slightly different feeling. When you breathe out and in, they're slightly different, but that's the general area of focus. We're just deciding on that. So the job to be done is to simply pay attention. That's what you're attempting to do. Don't think you'll be successful, but you've got to start with something. What's the thing I'm trying to do? What am I trying to do? I'm going to decide to pay attention to that sensation. That's literally all you're trying to do. That's it. That's the job. Now, why is that hard? Well, because the mind never stops chatting, the excitement one. And within 3 seconds, you know, you're wandering off and you totally forget what you're doing. We all know that. So then the other extreme is you sit, watch your breath, and within 3 breaths, you're sinking into this kind of comfortable feeling. And before you know it, you're asleep. These are the 2 extremes that went through the entire 9 techniques, the 9 stages of this technique. You're trying to conquer, to get ever more subtle excitement, ever more subtle dullness, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, until you've conquered the excitement, until you've conquered the dullness, until you've got this fine laser-like focus. The best we can do is say the words, because we've never touched it, we've never experienced it. It's beyond conceptual and beyond sensory. It's at a level of mind that we don't even posit as existing in the West, you know. So it's just interesting. It's fascinating. And the interesting point is, this level of mind is so subtle and so utterly unknown to us. It has a character, and Lama talks about this in Mahamudra. He just describes some of the characteristics, some of the qualities we would accomplish just getting single point of concentration. And as he said, it's almost like impossible to believe. Impossible to even believe it. To believe it's not like science fiction, you know. So it's really, what we're talking about, something pretty incredible, which is marvelous because it shows us the power of our mind, the amazing potential of the human mind, you know. So like with everything, you got to start somewhere. And we might never get even to the 2nd stage of concentration. It doesn't matter. We get benefit, you know, when we start to make the effort to pay attention. And then you bring it to bear in your daily life, you know. So before we go there further, I just want to discuss the 3rd category of states of mind that I call the mechanics, that are neither virtuous or non-virtuous. They're neither ridiculous, or they're neither valid and virtuous and appropriate. They're neither attachment or anger or love or compassion. And these ones, they're called, for example, there's one called concentration. Concentration itself is neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. Try and get this meaning, because this is Buddhist psychological talk, you know. But they're necessary state of mind, utterly necessary. Another one is called, this word is really interesting, this word mindfulness. There's so many, you know, interpretations of it, so many variations of interpretations that people are using in modern psychology. And that's okay. Buddha doesn't own it. He's not dogmatic. Anyone can have their own definition. But if you want to be the Buddhist, you better know precisely the Buddhist definition. Otherwise, you're going to be very confused, you know. So it's one of these neutral states, they call them neutral states of mind, that is really literally is a part of your mind that when you're, let's say, you know, you're making the cake and you're concentrating on making the cake, you're focusing, you're paying attention, and you know, you go through the steps. Now I've got the flour, now the milk, now this. But you know yourself, if you keep getting distracted by things, even you're thinking, let's say you've been unhappy, you're angry with your husband or something, you know yourself, you'll get so distracted, you will forget what you're doing, won't you? So mindfulness's job, this part of your mind, very precise, it's the part of your mind, it's like watching. And then it sees that the attention's wandered off and you're getting mad at your hubby. And mindfulness brings it back. It brings it back to the object. It brings it back. Okay, come on, Robina, stop chatting away to yourself. Leave your husband alone. What are you doing? Where are you up to in the cake? That's a simple example. Mindfulness is like called memory, actually. It's like short-term memory. All sorts of very, as I said, very vague, interesting definitions of it. So there's concentration. Intention, the word intention, not meaning good motivation, just merely bare bones volition. I will. That is one of these states of mind. It's not virtuous or non-virtuous. It's the starting point of everything, intention. Then attention, you pay attention. Attention, intention, concentration, good memory or mindfulness. There's another one called alertness or vigilance. There's another one called discrimination. It's working every millisecond in your mind. It's the ability millisecond by millisecond to distinguish between this and that and color and blue and round and green and red and X and D, and every tiny second of the day it's working. And if that's not working, you're in big trouble. So of course, as a Buddhist, the main function of this discrimination is to discriminate in the mind between the delusions and the virtues, which is the essence of the job of being a Buddhist, you know. So these are all the mechanics of our mind working in the background. If they're not working properly, then you become senile, you become, you know, you get Alzheimer's. These bits are missing. So we need to, and these are the parts of our mind that are trained to an incredible degree in concentration meditation. You really hone these parts of your mind: concentration, mindfulness, alertness, discrimination, attention. You're really honing these, you know, sharpening them, making them useful, so that we use these in daily life to actually have control over the seeming chaos in here that we tend to think we can't control. We think we can't control because we give all the power to the outside world. We give all the power to the external events that trigger these states of mind. And we really don't have techniques in our culture to work on the mind itself. So this is Buddha's expertise. It's incredible if you think about it. It's incredible if you think about it. It's marvelous, you know. So before I go further, before we do a technique, do you have any questions, everybody, anybody, specifically about what I've discussed so far, you know?
Folks, you can just unmute or raise your hand with the raise hand icon, or send a question in the chat.
Go on, everybody. Any questions? Nothing? Nothing? No questions. Okay. So why don't we then discuss the ideal posture? I mean, we've all done this often enough, but we'll act as if we haven't done it before. Let's do it freshly. Okay. There are various part of the posture, various positions of the body, around about 8, I suppose, that have been found by the yogis over the centuries to be most conducive for the mind to engage in meditation. So part of our problem here is, you know, as Lama Yeshe says, we make the body the boss, you know. We're so addicted to our bodies. We can't imagine being a person without a body. We think we are the body, in fact, you know. So the body is enormous for us. Our physical feelings are very, very dominant. So the thing is, the body doesn't meditate. The mind meditates. But we need the body to be in a conducive position. That's really clear. So all of these points have come from the experience of the great meditators over the centuries. So the first one is the legs. So the ideal scenario is to be in what they call full lotus position. And there's something quite technical about this. You know, when they talk in the Vajrayana teachings, the more advanced teachings, they talk about the subtle physical energies, the subtle nervous system and the subtle wind energies going through that nervous system and our mind connected to those wind energies. This is the Vajrayana model. according, we need to have all of those very aligned very nicely, so the mind can really do the job of getting more subtle. And so this full lotus position, so called, which you have the left leg up on your right thigh and your right leg in the front over on the left thigh, it makes your body incredibly stable. I mean, when you read about the yogis, one biography I've been working on is Geshe Lama Kontrok, one of our lamas, who's a yogi up in the mountains for years and years and years. And these meditators, when they've got single point of concentration, when they've got samadhi, you saw, if you were to see a person who'd fully developed this samadhi, they would look like they were dead because they've gone beyond the conceptual and the sensory, when the mind's really subtle. So this position is incredibly conducive to that, because you can sit in that position without falling over for days and weeks. So there's something very practical about it. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I remember reading one point where he said, even if you can start your session sitting in full lotus just for a second, it's really auspicious. It's very auspicious to sort of create the cause to be able to do it in the future, So it's very nice to think like that. So we can't do that, have one leg on the other thigh, and we can't do that regular cross-legged, and we can't do that in a chair. You do what you can, but it's good to know the ideal and you aim for that, So that's the first one. Now, if we're going to be sitting in a chair, the important thing is you don't slump into the back of the chair. You don't have a very comfortable couch. You'll just go straight to sleep. You need to have a fairly firm chair, but you don't slump into the back. You don't lean into the back of the chair. You hold up your own body, because it's obvious, isn't it? A person who's sitting cross-legged is holding up their body themselves. They have to have. And this full lotus position enables your body to be very upright. Effortlessly, it stays like that. So if you're in a chair, you don't slump into the back, but you have your feet firmly planted on the ground. So you hold up your back. So the second thing then is your legs. The first is your bottom and the legs. The second is your back. So the back should be upright. Of course, your back is not straight, but have it upright. So the trouble and then the third one is, they say, the shoulders to be sort of upright but relaxed. But our trouble is, as soon as we make the body upright, we tense the muscles, don't we? So it's important thing when you sit up, even do that now, have your body upright, but then keep your body upright, but flop the muscles completely, especially around the abdomen. We hold a lot of tension with our muscles. Have your body upright, but the muscles relaxed. It's very important. So your legs, the back, your shoulders up, but relaxed, not tense, no tension. That's the muscles. Your hands, there's many mudras. I mean, Geshe Lama Kontrok, this amazing yogi that we were doing the biography on, who stepped in mountains for years and years and years. He had his hands, one monk who first met him there, he had his hands like on his knee, upright like this, with his two thumbs in the palm. You hear that's a position of the hands. The one we learn is like this one, left underneath, right on top, thumbs touching like this, forming a triangle. So that's a typical one we can start with. If you don't like that, you can sit with your hands on your lap. It's okay. But that's the classic one that's taught. That's your bottom, your legs, your back, your shoulders, your hands. Now, the main thing is your head. Not the main, but the final bit is your head. And there's several points about it. Have your head slightly tilted forward, not thrust back. When the head is thrust back, it makes the mind agitated. So slightly tilted forward. Jaw, chin tucked in a bit. That's the way to do. Chin tucked in, slightly tilted forward. The next is your jaw, to be relaxed as you can. The next one is your lips slightly apart. It seems odd, but they say like that. But the next bit's very odd. The tongue up behind the palate, behind the top teeth, near the palate. And this, the yogis have all found, it's very practical, it enables you not to have to swallow your spit or to dribble, apparently, for the long-term meditators. That's the reason. Tongue behind the top teeth, just near the palate, the tip of the tongue. And of course, breathing through your nose. And finally, your eyes. Again, the yogis, who meditate day and night, when they're meditating in the daytime, then for them, it's good to have they say, especially if it's not daytime, your eyes open, because the light can come in, but because you've got good concentration, you don't get distracted by the visual objects. But to most of us, we have no concentration, so we would get distracted by all the visual things. So then maybe we have our eyes lightly closed, But if you've got very focused mind and the mind is deeply internal, beyond the senses, the light can still come in and help your mind stay sharp. So this is the position that they talk about in the text, okay? the legs, your back, hands, shoulders, tongue, jaw, lips, tongue, and the eyes. And if you're going to have your eyes closed, then have your eyes finally looking downwards, as if you're looking along your nose towards the ground. That's, if you have your eyes up in the head, that's distracting as well. You know, it makes the mind agitated. That's the position that is taught over the centuries. So just sort of settle into that, okay? Settle into that. So now let's talk first about the technique, and then we will do it for a few minutes. So, because you've got to, you got to know what you're doing. You need to be precise, So what we're going to do, we're going to concentrate. We're going to aim to concentrate, which means you don't actually concentrate, because that's the end result, isn't it? But you're attempting to concentrate. So the simple way to say that, as I said before, the actual technique, the precise technique that you're doing, literally is paying attention to the object of your focus, which in this case is the breath at the nostrils. So before we pay attention, let's identify the object we're going to focus on. So just take a couple of breaths. Don't force your breath, shouldn't be loud. Just take a couple of breaths and locate that sensation precisely. So you can feel it's slightly different, isn't in and out, but that's the area of focus. That's it. So, it's like a bit, I always use this analogy. It's kind of simple, silly, dumb, but it's sort of simple. Imagine you're in a room of like 100 people and you're really excited to hear everything everyone's saying, which is really what our head is. It's full of not just 100 people, it's 1,000 people, 1,000 thoughts a minute raging on in our head, isn't it? And we can't stop paying attention to them. We can't stop getting involved in all the conversations. So it's like you're in that room and all the people around, and you don't ask them to leave. You can't ask the people to leave. You don't ask the thoughts to go away. That you'll go crazy if you think that's meant to be the point. If you think the job you're doing is to make the thoughts go away, you will explode and go crazy. You can't do that. It's not possible. And anyway, it's not the job. You let the people be there chatting. Your job is to have the determination, the will, the determination. I'm going to watch that spot on the wall. It's a simple example. So, what we tend to do is I'm going to watch the breath, and you get all the thoughts come and you hear the noise in the background. We get annoyed, get irritated, upset. So we think the job is to stop the people talking, stop the noise and stop the thoughts. You go nuts if you think that way. That's not your job. That's not your job. Your job is to decide you're going to do something. So you're going to decide to pay attention to the breath. That's your job, and that is it. So then what's going to happen? Well, we know what's going to happen. Within 2 thoughts, 2 breaths, you're spacing out already. You're becoming dull. The thoughts are loud and you start following them. Or you become dull and space out. Even within a minute, some people go to sleep, So what we're going to do is use these other parts of our mind to help attention do its job of watching the breath. So one part of your mind is mindfulness. Think of it as like a little mummy watching, your mother watching. Mindfulness. So as soon as attention wanders off, this other part of your mind, which is watching, mindfulness, brings it back to the breath. Think that these different bits are doing their job. What we tend to think is, I'm watching the breath. I'm bringing my mind back to the breath. I am being vigilant. I am being alert. Don't say like that. Don't talk like that. Talk about the bits of your mind all doing their job. Attention is watching the breath. Intention is deciding, I will watch the breath. Attention is watching the breath. Mindfulness is catching if it wanders off and bringing it back to the breath. Now, there's another one even above that. His Holiness calls it like the policeman, and that's called vigilance or alertness. And there's another term people use, I don't know, I just find it an odd one, but it's called introspection. It just seems weird to me, but that's what they translate it as. But the ones I'm familiar with are either alertness or vigilance. His Holiness calls it a policeman. That's even watching that mindfulness and attention are doing their job. And that's kind of checking that all. So there's many bits of your mind all working. Of course, we don't identify these bits. We don't think this way, but they're all there doing their bit, okay? So yes, indeed, I am watching the breath. But think about this. Well, let's be precise. Which part of I? Well, it's your mind. Which part of your mind? Attention. So attention does a job. Mindfulness does a job. Alertness does a job. They're all doing their bit, you know. And the aim is to keep attention on the breath. So now then you ask the question, well, what do I do with all the thoughts? You don't do anything. You let them be. You mind your own business. Now, we know this experience. We can be really focused on a book or a movie and the people in the kitchen talking, you won't even notice. So we know we can do it, but it takes effort, you know. And that's what you have to apply, a reasonable amount of effort and determination. I'm going to watch. So we're going to do it now. We're going to like 4 or 5 minutes. I'm going to remind you every now and again. We're going to, with determination, we think, I'm going to, for 5 minutes, I'm going to watch the breath. I'm going to watch the breath. That's it. Every time it wanders off, mindfulness will bring it back. Every time I feel spaced out, I'll get myself alert. I'll adjust myself, you know. You're adjusting yourself between excitement and dullness. But the job you're doing, the thing is you're paying attention to the breath. Now, the thoughts, you allow them to come and you allow them to go. You train yourself to stay on the breath. That's the point. And if there's noises, don't pay attention. Don't make them go away. Don't wish they'd go away. Don't criticize yourself. Just pay proactively, with determination, pay attention to the breath. So let's just do that for about 5 minutes. The thoughts are going to chat away nonstop. Just let them do that. Stay on your breath. Really watch it. Just bring your mind back to the breath and kind of adjust your mind. If you feel you're spacing out, you feel you're overexcited, just adjust it and just focus on the breath, in and out. That's it. Keep your mind sharp. Your alertness is very sharp. Your tension is sharp. So relax now. That's about 5 minutes. Okay. So as you know, I said we did this retreat with Lama. He made us do 5-minute sessions, because then somehow, you know, making kind of the most of just 5 minutes. Really, you can. It's really helpful for the mind. I tell you, he'd get us to do 5, then he'd get us to relax, open our eyes, wriggle, and then go back to 5 minutes again. It's very interesting, you know. So anyway, any questions now? Any questions at all, people? Anything from this? Any questions so far? Clarity of words, definitions. Any questions? Okay, so the thing is, this is a simple technique for developing concentration, and bringing the mind from the excitement back to the breath, bringing the mind from the dullness back to the breath, adjusting, you know, not over adjusting, but learning to adjust it, you know. So the thing is, most of us, as I said before, we won't get single point of concentration. We won't, and that's okay. But my feeling is that doesn't mean there's no benefit. And I think the real benefit, this is the thing about. Okay, let me just talk a bit more about insight. We get so many vague ideas. Tibetans are very precise. So they call it, you know, okay, start again. So now, okay. We're so addicted to this word meditation as being not thinking. When we hear that actually in the second mode, the goal is to get insight into something. The goal is to understand something. That's what insight means, to understand it. And of course, the level of understanding we're trying to get to finally is incredibly subtle. But we've got to start where we are, you know. So insight just means understanding. You get it. Oh, I see. I get it. That's understanding. So don't think that's unique to Buddhism. For God's sake, we're doing this all the time. Don't mystify these terms. It's so important. Insight is a lovely word. It's just inner knowing, inner seeing. It's very delicious. You understand something, you understand it internally, experientially. That's perfect. We all need that. So this is why I like to use the example. If you're trying to, anything we've learned in our culture, we're very good at this. We use these 2 modes of meditation. And I'm not being sarcastic. You listen to what I'm saying. But we're so addicted to hearing them as in uniquely, somehow spiritual in their nature, therefore mystical. It's just ridiculous, you know. It's really quite embarrassing how we do this. But think about this. what we're trying to get insight to finally is we're going to run insight into the reality of impermanence. We're trying to get insight into how karma works, cause and effect. We're trying to get insight into the way the mind works and the delusions and what they think and how they feel. We're trying to get insight into all these different stages of Buddhist thinking. We're trying to make it our own thinking. Finally, we're trying to realize bodhicitta and then emptiness. So we've got to get insight into all of these. Well, what's the method we use to get insight? It's not complicated. It's almost embarrassingly simple. We don't think about it. The term they use in Tibetan, the technique you use in the second mode of meditation, based on concentration in the first mode, you get your mind to a certain degree of concentration, this focus. You use that focus, that concentrated, focused mind. You go to the second mode, and the aim is now you want to, you want to get some insight into impermanence. So what you're doing, what part of your mind you're using in the second mode to get that insight is literally called thinking. Now, Tibetans call it analytical meditation. So we get totally confused by that term because meditation seems to contradict. And then analytical sounds kind of fancy. Well, what do you think meditation means? To familiarize your mind. And analytical is a fancy word for to think about something. So we know the method we use to get insight into those mathematical problems, to get insight into how the music works, to get insight into anything you're studying. It's really obvious. The part of your mind you're using to trigger insight is called thinking, in a very sophisticated, clear way. When you're studying, when you go home and your teacher told you 1 + 1 is 2, she's basically telling you, go home, Robina, first get some concentration. Sit down in your chair, get some focus. Now, when you got some focus, go to the second mode of meditation. And I want you to get insight into this, what I've just told you, the 1 + 1 is 2. So think about this. What do you need? What are you employing to get insight? You have to know the meaning of the words. You have to know the meaning intellectually of 1 and plus and equals and 2. And initially, it's a vague concept to you. You little girl, you don't understand. So what are you going to do to get insight into it? You're going to think it through logically. You don't go with concentrated mind. You don't go 1 + 1 is 2. 1 + 1 is 2, hoping for the penny to drop. That's idiocy. You use your noggin. This is exactly how you realize impermanence. It's exactly how you realize emptiness. It's exactly how you realize everything. But we don't use these words, and that's why we get so confused, So obviously, the more concentration you've got, the more powerful your mind is, the more unbelievably powerful your mind is, and you can use that. You can use that focused level of mind to do the most sophisticated thinking. And don't think thinking is at a gross level only. The way Buddhism is describing, when you've got really powerful concentration, Tsongkhapa says it in one of his Lamrim texts, you can use it to analyze anything you like with the most sophisticated focus. The level of conceptuality we need to use to get insight into emptiness is unbelievably sophisticated. Levels of conceptuality and clarity that we don't even think about, It's like the mind of some genius mathematician, That level of brilliance, that's the kind of brilliance we need to cultivate, to think about depending on arising in order to get insight into emptiness, to think about impermanence, to think about karma. So we're using thinking to get insight into the things. But the first one is you've got to get focus. You have to get some concentration. So the meditations in this book, all together, all the material from the FBMT is all in this, as I said, into this booklets I've provided. So the one, for example, that's called the 9-round breathing. This is a lovely, I'm just going to discuss this one. There's a lovely technique that Lama always used to get us to do. It's very sweet. We do it sometimes in the mornings, It's a very sweet technique. They do it often first thing in the morning to steady the breath, to steady the breath and the mind, So you do, and you're utilizing some visualization. You're thinking of attachment, breathing out your attachment, the first 3. Then you breathe out your anger, the second 3. Then you breathe out your ignorance, the third 3. It's a nice little technique where you're using the breath to stabilize your mind, but you're also utilizing thinking. So it's a very sweet technique. The next one, in chapter 6 is meditation. This is a typical analytical meditation. You get some concentration first, then you use that concentrated focused mind, and you do the thinking about the different advantages we've got of appreciating this precious human rebirth. So these kinds of meditations are simply using your thinking. But the idea, of course, is to have it to be focused thinking. because that's what causes you for the penny to drop. If you really think through your mathematical problem, at some point, the penny will drop. I get it. That's an insight. So it's not a system that we're not familiar with, but we just mystify these terms. It's one of the worst things we do, you know. So strange. What time is it? My feeling is we don't need 2 hours. I don't want to cut you short or anything. I think an hour and a half is enough. So I think we've got 15 more minutes. But it'd be really wonderful. I don't know. How can we do it that maybe people have a bit of meditation before each session? What can we do about that? Can you think of somebody who'd like to do that, maybe in the group? Would someone like to take on that job? Do you want to think about that, Dundrup? Because I mean, when we were doing it in the Zurich Center, we've been doing Discovering Buddhism in the last 6 months. They've got a coordinator for the DB group, and they have a bit of a session before I come and do the teaching. They do a bit of meditation, and then at the end they do something as well. So I don't know if we'd like to do that. I'm not sure. It's up to what individuals want, you know. Any thoughts, Dundrup?
I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to lead that.
Or would you do that? That's the one. Well, that's wonderful. I think it'll make the good coherent for the group. It's good to just do something. I mean, maybe. So I think next week we'll do just 90 minutes now. But my feeling is, Dundrup, next week, why don't you do first like half an hour at 7 o'clock New Mexico time. You lead just go back over what we've just discussed and lead lead one of the meditations, maybe even just 15 minutes. I'll come in at say 7:15 or something, just 15 minutes, the group together. I mean, I'd really encourage you to do that. And it's nice, any discussions you want to have, you know, it's together. And I think 90 minutes is really more than enough. I really think so, Dundrup, but that's okay. Not to mention I speak fast than anybody else, but I think 90 minutes is enough. But I really, really, really want you between classes to study these course notes. They're all the FPMT notes all put together, the meditations and the teachings by Sangha Kadro, the whole course. She's taught it in much more detail than I'm doing. It'll really give you a lot of knowledge. And then secondly, the second part of the teachings by Lama Zopa, Lama Yeshe, and Geshe Jamba Chekchok. All the stuff is all together there in these course notes that I prepared. So please study these. It'll give you much more knowledge than just listening to me, okay? And my voice is running out. I'm sorry. I've had a cold for like a week and it just hasn't got better yet. So are there any questions, dearest people? Any questions at all? Anything, please, I beg you. Any old thing? No questions. All right. So what else can I say then? Maybe what I'll do, maybe I'll just, for what it's worth, just for the blessing, I'll get Pabonka Rinpoche, his teaching, and I will go through his rough summary of the 9 stages of concentration. It's very technical, but it's just nice to hear it for the imprints, okay? So I'll just read that out. And then next week, I can read you from Lama Yeshe's Mahamudra and get you all excited about all the amazing experiences you can have. So we'll get one end of the stick and the other. We'll get the technical side first. Then we'll get all the excitement next week. Let me find Pabonka Rinpoche's description, very clear description of the 9 stages. It's very interesting. Let me find it. I'll just read it out and you can just listen to it. Where's my books? There we go. Here it is. Okay. Oh, to find it. I'm sorry, haven't found it. Oh. Here we go. All right. So let's go to even just the headings that he talks about in the development of concentration. you know, the first, so in particular, the way to train in the last, so in the Mahayana, in the Lamrim, concentration meditation, this is an interesting extra point, okay? Concentration meditation, samatha, is actually a Hindu teaching. It's not even Buddhist. So where it belongs in the Lamrim, in its character, it's a Hinayana teaching. So it's actually the middle scope. Its character is a Hinayana teaching, but it's taught in the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva at the end of the path. And then that's the 5th of the 6 perfections. The 6th one, of course, is insight, Vipassana, into emptiness. So that also is a Hinayana teaching. By definition, the Hinayana yogis need to realize emptiness in order to get their nirvana. So it's a Hinayana teaching. Emptiness is not a Mahayana teaching. It's a Hinayana teaching, but they're taught in the framework of the Mahayana as the 5th and the 6th perfections. So is that what I want to tell you? So now, how to train in the very essence of concentration. He called, this translation here says mental quiescence. That's another term for calm abiding. So just breakdowns of all the different sections, okay? Then cultivating the prerequisites. So, you know, there are various prerequisites for getting concentration. The first is to be in a conducive place. Well, that was the point I mentioned before. Venerable Rene said that his mind got more subtle more easily at a busy place, but which was very blessed by the presence of holy beings, than in a quiet place. So that's a really interesting point. But ideally, the place for concentration is where there's no wild animals, where there's no running water, where it's very quiet, very peaceful. And Venerable Rene said this. He said, during that retreat, when you start to get concentration, your mind gets very, very, very sensitive. The tiniest shift in the wind can be really distressing, you know, because your mind gets so sensitive. So these are really important points. It should be where there's no, yeah, a whole bunch. You should have few wants. This is what to be prepared to get to the mountains. Have few wants, you know, no attachment to large quantities of fine things and food. I mean, you know, look at us, most of our world. Being content. This sounds pretty intense, doesn't it? Contentment is making do with the bare necessities of food and clothing. You'll be attached to sensual things if you are not content and do not have few wants. You will not develop single point of concentration because you will be distracted by the need to protect your possessions and so on. I mean, this is true. Look at us, you know. We can't go more than 5 hours without eating. We go crazy. We don't. I mean, just look at the number of things we have to preoccupy ourselves with. It'd be very, that's why it's literally impossible to get concentration if you've got so many other distractions in life. Having pure ethics. It means good morality, good virtue, good control body and speech, good control mind. If you're overwhelmed by thinking about food the whole time, you'll go mad in retreat. You won't last 2 days. If you go mad, if you're thinking about your girlfriend all day, you'll go crazy. If you're thinking about your job, your money, your things, your possessions, your fears, you'll go nuts, you know. So really to even get to the point of being ready to get to the mountains, to get single point of concentration, you're already pretty advanced, I tell you. Abandon all the demands of society. I mean, forget it. Now, the actual way to achieve it, and it explains different things. So I just want to, read through these 9 stages just for the blessing of hearing it, okay? Of hearing the stages, hearing the words. So there's different, everybody has different translation terms, which is part of the problem, you know. The first one, the first of the 9 is called fixing the mind. I mean, fixing meaning staying on the object. This is achieved by the power of studying the instruction on visualization. Here, typically, they're describing, oh, look at my iPad gets confusing, no, it disappears. Here, the typical object of concentration is a visualization of the Buddha, not the breath. This is a typical one we're describing here. So the object of concentration will be the Shakyamuni Buddha, for example, or whatever it is, you know. So this is achieved by the power of studying the instruction on visualization with your guru. However, you are only evoking the visualization at this point. It does not stay. You cannot make it persist for any length of time. At this point, through the power of the mind's mental processes of conceptual and analytical thinking, you can detect that you are under the power of a lack of focus or excitement, meaning dull or excited. You feel that your conceptual thoughts have increased, but in fact, these thoughts have not increased. You have only had the insight of gaining some acquaintance with your conceptual thoughts. This is a really interesting point. What often happens when we start to become Buddhist, or you start a spiritual practice and you start to observe your mind, one of the commonest things we feel is our anger is getting worse, our jealousy is getting worse, our attachment is getting worse. But that's exactly what Mabon Rinpoche is saying. No, it's actually a sign of success because you're noticing. Our mind has been as crazy as ever since beginningless time, but now, like a miracle, we're beginning to pay attention. So you've got to be very brave to do this, because you freak out a bit and think, oh my God, I'm getting worse. It's the commonest feeling we all have. We're not getting worse. We're just noticing. And this is what is utterly marvelous. The second one is called fixation, fixedness, sort of like fixed with some continuity. After meditating in this way, you'll be able to evoke the image and the image is meaning a visualization. That's the object. Okay. You'll be able to make it even persist for a while. And you can meditate for about the time it takes to say, like about a minute, probably. At this point, your conceptual thoughts, and then when they mean conceptual thoughts, they mean all the chatting, never ending, all the emotions, all the dramas, are sometimes peaceful and sometimes they develop. This gives you some insight into what it's like to be cured of conceptual thinking. So it seems to me this second stage is already quite advanced. Think about this. Think about this, to have an experience of your mind actually being quiet, It's pretty incredible. Both these first two mental states have a great deal of dullness and excitement, these two main obstacles. And the visualization does not remain for long. At this time, you are using so you're really trying. So, okay, never mind. The third one is called patchy fixation. Fixation just means focused, I'd say. This state is like a garment with patches on the material. Though the image basically persists, the mind becomes distracted from the visualization. But you are immediately aware of this and you patch up your fixation on the object. The duration of your distraction is shorter than in the previous two states. At this point, you are developing a powerful memory. And when they say memory, they are meaning mindfulness, the ability to keep your mind. This is leading to concentration. It's leading to concentration. The mindfulness is the stage of development. When you've got mindfulness, when you stay on the object, that's a stage that leads to finally concentration, So the next one is called the fourth one. 1, 2, 3, 4, good fixation. You have developed powerful memory and mindfulness, and you can fix your mind on the meditation object. From now on, it is impossible for you to lose the meditation object. And so this state is far more forceful than the previous three. Just the same, while you are not losing the meditation object, you fall prey to the strongest forms of dullness and excitement. Both the third and the fourth mental states are achieved through the power of mindfulness, this ability to bring your mind and stay there, keep the attention on there. From now on, mindfulness is really perfected. So this is a really advanced state. This is to show you what I'm getting at. Venerable Rene said he maybe touched upon the fifth of the 9. So that's the fourth in the 2.5 years. He said, I've got that in the first year. And he said to me at another time in the interview I did with him in Mandalay in 95, he said the joy that his mind experienced was so superior to any joy he had ever experienced through his senses. So this tells us that this is already a pretty subtle state. And that's the thing that's a surprising idea for us. When we think of pleasure, when we think of happy feelings, the only way we know how to get pleasant feelings is to have contact with an object of attachment, right? And that level of pleasure is still pleasure, but because it's driven by attachment and because it's connected to an object, a very gross object, the mind is very gross. They say it's very contaminated. The mind is very disturbed. So everybody who's had any even moment of good meditation, they will all say it was joyful, but it was extremely peaceful. And this is not an experience we tend to have. When we say joy, we kind of like hyperventilating. When we say peaceful, we kind of sounds like it's dull. But peaceful is the key characteristic of the mind when it's more subtle and when it's joyful. So it's kind of something interesting to think about that, isn't it? That's the fourth. Now the fifth, becoming disciplined. In the fourth, the mind is overly knotted up inside. Now the fifth, the greatest danger is from subtle dullness. Here you develop a powerful vigilance, this other state of mind, the policeman, as His Holiness said. Vigilance stands on guard. You think this vigilance is a quality of single-pointed concentration, and it kind of makes your mind kind of optimistic. The difference between the fourth and the fifth is that only the former has coarse dullness and excitement. The sixth, becoming peaceful. In the fifth, the mind has been uplifted rather too much. And under these circumstances, the greatest danger now is from subtle excitement. When subtle excitement arises, you develop a more powerful form of vigilance or alertness in order to detect it. You see that even this subtle excitement is a fault and that you need to prevent it. The difference between this state and the fifth is that subtle dullness is not the main danger here. Both the fifth and the sixth are achieved through the power of vigilance. At this point, the power of vigilance has been perfected. Already you've perfected mindfulness. That's gone. You've got that. Now vigilance is even more subtle, and now you've achieved that. Becoming very pacified, the seventh. In the seventh state, it's very difficult to develop dullness or excitement because the power of your vigilance and your mindfulness have been perfected. You develop the power of perseverance at this point, for you wish to abandon dullness and excitement as much as possible because you have seen the damage they cause. The difference between the sixth and the seventh is this. In the sixth, you must be very wary of the danger of falling prey to subtle dullness and excitement. This is not the case with the seventh. At this stage, there's no danger from subtle dullness or excitement. All the same, you must make an effort in the techniques to abandon both of them. In the fifth and the sixth, there was concern about the harm excitement could do to you. Now, at the seventh, you persevere and are able to put a stop to excitement or dullness whenever they occur. They cannot then interrupt you for long. The five mental states, starting with number 3 and going up to number 7, are single-pointed concentration for the most part, interrupted by excitement and dullness. At these stages, okay, never mind. So now finally, 2 more, 8 and 9. Becoming single-pointed is the 8th. At the beginning, you apply the antidote of mindfulness. At the beginning, you bring your mind back to the object. And though this involves a slight effort, you are then able to pursue the whole length of the meditation session without the slightest excitement or dullness. Here, so then, by the 8th state, you do not have to put effort into the application of vigilance. After the slight initial effort during the 8th mental state, the whole session is not interrupted by dullness, excitement, and so on. Thus, the mental process at this stage is that of uninterrupted fixation. The 7th and 8th are achieved through the power of perseverance. 9th, fixed absorption. The fixation is now effortless. You spontaneously achieve this effortlessness by repeated cultivation of familiarity with the 8th state. You need not exert the slightest effort to slip into single-pointed concentration. You are now completely absorbed in single-pointed concentration. This state corresponds to the single-pointed mental quiescence of the desire realm. This 9th state is achieved through the power of complete familiarity. Summarizing now, in the first, your insight acquaints you with your conceptual thoughts. In the second, you gain some insight into what it is like when your conceptual thoughts take a rest. In the third, it seems as if these conceptual thoughts have exhausted themselves. To summarize, in states 1 and 2, the image remains only a short while. In states 2 and 3, your distraction lasts only a short while. The difference between states 3 and 4 is whether or not it is possible for you to lose the meditation object. In the fourth, you develop coarse dullness, but not in the fifth. In the fifth, you have to be aware of subtle dullness, but not in the sixth. Though you develop subtle excitement in the sixth, it is less than you had before. In the sixth, you have to be particularly on your guard against slipping into subtle dullness or excitement. There's no need for this in the seventh. In the seventh, you have excitement and dullness, but not in the eighth. In the eighth, you depend on effort, but not in the ninth. In the seventh, you merely put a stop to your excitement and dullness. There's no need to be very wary of falling prey to them. So that's it for the imprints. Maybe all achieve that one day. And then I'll read you, next time I'll read you the exciting things that are experienced from Lama Yeshe's point of view. It'll get you so excited you won't believe it. To show how amazing our mind is, okay? So I'm going to finish now, Dondrup, okay? Thank you, dearest people, so kind. Please read the course notes. Please read Sangha Kado's teachings. They are so, so helpful, okay? And we dedicate, just thinking all these seeds we planted, this 90 minutes, as many seeds we planted in the mind where we nourish them, and maybe have this strong aspiration to develop this amazing part of our mind, this incredible capacity we've got for clarity and brilliance, so we can transform our lives, you know, for our sake and the sake of others. Jangchub Semchog Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Guchi, Ke Pa Nyampa, Me Pa Yang, Gong Ne Gondu, Pelba Shog. That's all, darlings. Thank you so, so much, Mary. Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Venerable Dundrup. Thank you.